right, deep divers. Ready to dive into something powerful.
Always up for a deep dive, especially when it's something like this.
Today we're tackling Unmuted, the fierce uprising of black women against systemic oppression by Riker.
Now, this is a book that doesn't hold back.
Oh, absolutely not. It's a straight-up call to arms for recognizing and respecting what black women experience in a system that frankly seems designed to keep them quiet.
Riker really goes beyond just laying out the problems.
Right.
She's naming names and calling out the BS, and then even offering ways to actually dismantle these systems that have kept black women invisible for far too long.
It's like she's taken all that simmering rage and turned it into like this weaponized manifesto, you know?
Definitely.
We're talking about righteous anger, strategic moves, and completely taking apart those tired old tropes like the angry black woman.
Absolutely.
And luckily we have our expert here to help us navigate all the nuances of Riker's arguments.
Well, I'm excited to break it all down with you. One of the most compelling things Riker brings up is this concept of black women's invisibility.
Oh yeah, she calls it the weight of invisibility.
Exact, and it goes deeper than just being overlooked.
It's about the actual cost of existing in a world that doesn't see you. Like, how does that play out in real life?
She talks about these unacknowledged taxes, you know.
Oh yeah, doing all the heavy lifting but getting none of the credit.
Exactly. And Riker uses some powerful statistics and personal stories to illustrate this, like the never-ending wage gap.
Ugh, it's 2020. It's ridiculous.
I know. Black women are still making, what, like 62 cents for every dollar a white man makes?
It's like the system is literally designed to keep them economically disadvantaged.
Right. And then there's the lack of representation in leadership roles, the way their contributions to history are just erased.
It's maddening. It's not just about economics either.
Absolutely.
I mean, Riker brilliantly uses the story of Anita Hill's testimony against Clarence Thomas to show how deeply rooted this silencing really is.
Such a powerful example.
Just to refresh everyone's memory, Anita Hill bravely testified about being sexually harassed during Thomas's confirmation hearings for the Supreme Court.
Back in the 90s.
Yeah, but instead of being believed, she was vilified and dismissed.
That's heartbreak.
It's like no one wanted to hear what she had to say.
And Riker argues that this is indicative of how black women's voices are often disregarded.
Even when they're risking everything to speak truth to power.
Exactly. And it's a pattern that sadly keeps repeating.
Over and over again.
And Riker connects this directly to the hashtag #MeToo movement, showing how the struggle for recognition and justice is far from over.
It's ongoing. Which brings us to her take on the angry black woman.
Oh, that's a good one.
I mean, we've all heard it used to shut down black women when they dare to speak up, right?
It's a classic silencing tactic, but Riker dismantles it beautifully in the book.
How so?
Well, she argues that anger is actually a perfectly valid response
To the kind of oppression they face.
Exactly. It's not about being irrational or overly emotional.
It's about refusing to just accept the status quo.
Yes. It's about saying, hey, I'm not going to be quiet and complicit in my own erasure anymore.
Exactly.
Yep.
And she takes it a step further by saying that misandry, while it exists,
It definitely exists.
doesn't hold a candle to the systemic power of misogyny.
It just doesn't.
And that it's often used as a way to deflect from valid feminist concern.
And honestly, just to maintain the patriarchy's control.
I gotta admit, that really got me thinking because
It's a good point.
I've definitely heard misandry used to discredit legitimate criticisms of sexism.
Oh, absolutely.
Like saying, oh, you just hate all men. Well, now we don't have to listen.
Zach Riker cuts through all that. She acknowledges that misandry can be harmful, of course.
Right, of course.
But she emphasizes that it simply doesn't have the same historical and institutional power as misogyny.
Not even close.
Not even close.
I think this is where Riker really pushes us to think critically about how we talk about gender and power. It's not about pitting men and women against each other. It's about understanding that historical system of oppression that's always benefited men.
The expense of women, exactly.
And black women especially bear the brunt of both racism and sexism.
It's a double whammy.
A double whammy. And speaking of systems, Riker's section on cultural appropriation was another one I was highlighting like crazy.
For sure. It's something we see all the time.
All the time.
Riker uses these super vivid examples, like how Native American headdresses are misrepresented.
How black hairstyles are commodified and stripped of their cultural meaning.
Completely.
It's like black women's creativity is constantly being mined for profit.
But they rarely see any of that profit.
Rarely see the benefit. It's a form of cultural theft, really.
Absolutely. And she emphasizes how important it is to respect cultural boundaries.
The cultures aren't costumes. So how does she suggest we actually engage with other cultures without crossing that line?
He talks about asking for permission
Okay.
and really listening to the communities you're engaging with and giving credit where credit's due. It's about understanding the origins of those cultural elements.
It's about being mindful consumers and allies.
Yes.
So instead of just jumping on the latest trend.
Without understanding its roots.
Right. And making sure we're supporting the artists and designers behind it.
Exactly. It's about moving through the world with awareness.
Awareness and respect.
Yeah.
And then Riker dives into this whole history of Black women's activism, and she does not hold back in highlighting their contributions, which are often overlooked. Frank.
Oh, they're so often overlooked. From the labor movement to the fight for suffrage to the hashtag #MeToo movement, Black women have always been on the front lines.
Pushing for equality and justice. She talks about the Montgomery bus boycott.
Oh, yeah. Sparked by Rosa Parks.
Her legendary refusal to give up her seat. I mean, that act of defiance was monumental for the civil rights movement.
It was a game changer. It showed the world what collective action can achieve.
And the incredible courage of Black women facing oppression.
Facing oppression, absolutely.
And Riker doesn't just focus on the historical figures, she brings it to the present day.
Right, highlighting people like Stacey Abrams.
And her voter registration efforts. I mean, she's literally shifted the political landscape.
She has. And let's not forget Tarana Burke.
Oh, the founder of the hashtag #MeToo movement. She's given voice to so many survivors.
Of sexual harassment and assault. This whole exploration of Black women's activism is just
inspiring.
It's inspiring. It really makes you realize just how much they've contributed.
And how often those contributions have been minimized or erased.
Exactly. Which leads to another fascinating idea Riker introduces, strategic essentialism.
Now, this one might be new for some people. Can you break that down for us?
Yeah. So think of it this way. Black women come from so many different backgrounds and experiences, but they also share this common ground of oppression. Strategic essentialism is about using those shared experiences to advocate for change.
Recognizing the strength in that collective identity.
Yes. It's like saying we might be different in a lot of ways, but we're united in our fight against oppression.
Makes sense.
But Riker also cautions against some of the pitfalls of strategic essentialism. Like, it can sometimes reinforce stereotypes.
If not used carefully.
Right.
So it's about finding that balance between collective action and individual differences.
Exactly. It's complex, and Riker explains it in a way that you really get it. You see how powerful and potentially problematic it can be.
And how it requires that nuance and critical thinking.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been so insightful already.
I know, right?
I can't wait to dig into even more of Riker's argument.
Me too. We've just scratched the surface. And then Riker takes us into this whole digital world.
Okay.
With her analysis of the digital diaspora.
Digital diaspora, like that.
Yeah, it's basically how Black women are using social media and all these online
amplify their voices.
Yes, to build community in ways they just couldn't before.
It's like they're creating their own spaces, their own networks to kind of get around those traditional gatekeepers.
Exactly, the ones who have always controlled the narrative. Riker talks about the power of movements like hashtag say her name.
Brought attention to police brutality against Black women.
Cases that often get, overshadowed.
In the bigger Black Lives Matter movement.
Exactly. It's about taking back the narrative.
Making sure these stories are heard. And you can't deny the power of social media to connect people and create change.
No, you can't. We saw it with hashtag #MeToo, Black Lives Matter, so many others.
And Riker makes this great point about how influencers and celebrities can help boost these grassroots efforts.
Oh, absolutely. She uses Beyonce as an example.
Perfect example.
Highlighting how she's used her platform to speak out against injustice.
And to celebrate Black culture. I mean, when someone like Beyonce uses her voice,
it reaches a global audience.
People have to pay attention.
They have to. It forces them to. It's about using that star power to shine a light on these struggles that are so often ignored.
Right, the ones that are silenced.
Exactly. And it's not just celebrities either. Riker talks about everyday Black women using Twitter, Instagram,
sharing their stories,
building community, organizing for change. It's about having that space where those voices can be heard without being filtered or censored.
It's about owning their narratives and connecting with others who understand those experiences.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about invisibility, the silencing, the power of online spaces. But what about this fierce uprising Riker keeps mentioning?
Right.
What does that actually look like in practice?
Well, that's where she gets into specific. How Black women can channel that anger, that frustration into action.
Okay, so concrete steps.
Concrete steps. It's about recognizing their collective power and using it to dismantle those oppressive systems. Remember, she talks about this matriarch's manifesto.
Oh yeah, that sounds pretty awesome.
Yeah, it is. And she connects it to this long lineage of powerful Black women leaders.
Going way back.
Way back to ancient African kingdoms. She talks about queens like Amina of Zazao and Nzinga of Ndongo and Matamba, who fiercely defended their people and expanded their territories.
I love that she brings in these historical figures that most people probably haven't even heard of.
I know, it's reclaiming that history.
Showing the strength and resilience that's always been there.
Always been there. And she traces this legacy of leadership through the transatlantic slave trade.
Showing how black women became the backbone of their
Nurturing their family, preserving their culture in the face of unimaginable cruelty.
figures like Harriet Tubman, risking her life to lead others to freedom. Sojourner Truth, speaking out against slavery and sexism.
These are the sheroes we should be celebrating.
Absolutely. And Riker's point is that this legacy is still alive today.
It is.
With people like Stacey Abrams, Tarana Burke,
Leading the charge.
leading the charge. So it's not just about holding a political office. It's about showing up for your community, speaking truth to power, demanding that change.
Exactly. And then Riker goes even deeper by exploring the spiritual dimension of these experiences. She talks about their connection to the divine feminine, this source of strength and resilience throughout history.
She mentions African goddesses, right? Like Ocean, Yamoja.
Yes, representing love, beauty, fertility, the power of the ocean. It's reclaiming those spiritual traditions that were suppressed during slavery and colonialism.
It's tapping into that ancestral wisdom,
Yeah.
recognizing the power of those spiritual connections.
And then using that power to fuel their fight for liberation. Now, this next topic might get a little controversial.
Okay.
But Riker dives right into the whole conversation about misandry.
All right, let's get into it.
She tackles it with so much nuance. You know how people throw around that term misandry to dismiss black women's anger?
Like, it's not justified. Oh, you're just a man-hater. We can't take you serious.
Exactly. But Riker challenges that whole narrative
By saying,
by saying that black women's anger is a valid response to the systemic oppression they've faced. She points out that historically they've been subjected to violence, exploitation, disrespect from men both inside and outside their communities.
so it's not about hating all men. It's about rejecting a system that's always privileged men at the expense of women, especially black women.
Zach, Riker even says misandry can be a form of self-preservation.
Wow, self-preservation?
Yes. In a world that doesn't protect them, sometimes you have to create your own survival mechanism.
That's a really interesting point.
It is, and it's about recognizing that those mechanisms are born out of necessity, not some irrational hatred.
So she's really pushing us to think differently about how we perceive black women's anger,
Yes. Instead of dismissing it, we need to listen
to understand its roots.
and acknowledge that it's valid. And that leads to another important concept she explored: erasure.
Erasure.
Black women's contributions have been systematically overlooked or minimized in almost every field.
It's like they're being written out of history.
Exactly. Their achievements ignored, stories untold, voices silenced. And Riker has so many examples. She talks about Henrietta Lacks.
Henrietta Lack, yeah.
Her cells were taken without consent.
And used for those groundbreaking medical treatments.
Yes, but for decades, her contributions were largely unacknowledged.
It's a heartbreaking example of how black women's bodies and labor have been exploited while they remain.
Invisible and uncredited. Riker argues this erasure is a form of...
How so?
It robs black women of their agency, their history, their rightful place in the world.
It's not accidental, is it, this erasure?
It's not. It's systemic. It's built into the fabric of our society. And that brings us to another form of erasure she discusses: the unacknowledged tax.
The unacknowledged tax. Okay, what's that about?
It's about all the extra burdens and challenges black women face in professional settings.
Because of both their race and their gender.
Exact. They're expected to code switch, to tone down their personalities, to navigate a culture that's often hostile or dismissive.
It's like they have to prove themselves constantly. Work twice as hard to be seen as competent and worthy of respect.
Exact. And she calls it unacknowledged because it's often invisible to those who don't experience it. But it takes a toll on their mental and emotional well-being.
He talks about black women being passed over for promotions, subjected to microaggressions and discrimination.
Constantly fighting for their voices to be heard.
It's got to be exhausting. It's demoralizing.
It is. And it's another way black women are systematically disadvantaged.
This unacknowledged tax is something I think a lot of people don't even realize is happening. It's so ingrained, it's just become the norm. But Riker brings it to light and makes us confront the consequences.
Exactly. And it's a call to action for employers to create more inclusive and equitable workplaces where black women can actually thrive. Which brings us back to that fierce uprising, right? Riker's not just pointing out the problem, she's offering a way forward.
A way to dismantle these systems,
Exactly.
channeling all that anger and frustration into action. And she sees black women as leading this uprising.
Absolutely at the forefront of this fight for a more just and equitable future.
She uses this powerful metaphor of black women as warriors, revolutionaries.
Fighting for their liberation and the liberation of their communities.
I love that. It's about reclaiming their power, refusing to be silenced or sidelined.
Exactly. And she ties this uprising to That digital landscape we were talking about. Remember the digital diaspora?
How Black women are using online platforms to connect and amplify their voice.
Yes, she sees that online activism as crucial to this uprising. It's a way to get around those traditional gatekeepers and reach a wider audience.
Creating real-world change through social media.
Exactly. Think about the impact of movements like hashtag Black Lives Matter and hashtag Say Her Name.
Bringing attention to racial injustice.
Right. And she also highlights the role of Black women bloggers, podcasters, influencers, shaping the narrative, challenging the status quo,
Creating their own media.
their own platform, telling their own stories on their own terms. And she talks about how they're using social media to support each other too.
To build a sense of community.
Yes, celebrating their accomplishments, creating that sisterhood and solidarity. It's about finding strength in shared experiences.
You know, I wanted to circle back to something we touched on earlier, this myth of reverse racism.
Oh yeah, that's a big one.
I think a lot of people still misunderstand what that even means.
Well, Riker breaks it down perfectly. It's this idea that white people can experience racism from Black people.
But it just doesn't hold up.
It doesn't, because racism isn't just about prejudice, it's about power. And historically, Black people have not held that kind of systemic power over white people in this country.
So individual prejudice can happen in any direction.
Of course.
But true racism needs power behind it.
It does. And she uses all these historical examples to make this point. Slavery, Jim Crow laws, the ongoing racial disparities in education, healthcare, the criminal justice system.